Most of the world is designed for neurotypical people, and we can have our feelings about that. And I think it's certainly important to work through those feelings as they come up. But at the same time, the reality is as it stands now, the world is just not designed for us. Hi, I'm Jen Barnes, and you're about to experience how to ditch the old ways of doing things, embrace your neurodivergence, learn tips and tricks to function optimally, and love yourself, neurodivergence and all. Welcome to the Self-Loved Woman podcast. Hey, it's Jen. I'm so glad you're here. I want to talk about something today that seems to be the main problem I see most ADHD women entrepreneurs have. And what makes me think that is it's the one that people talk to me most about. It's also the one that gets the most downloads or likes when I post anything about it or share a podcast on it. And you might already know what it is by that, but it's getting ourselves to do stuff consistently without having all of our energy go to getting ourselves to do stuff and those things, right? So I want to unpack this today because I think we've been told wrong. Like, I think we were told the wrong thing to help us do this. So there's some big misconceptions here that I want to unpack. And I just want to share like the biggest mistake I see most ADHD women entrepreneurs make is using all of these strategies, like trying strategy after strategy and tool after tool and multiple task tracking apps and time tracking apps and calendars and programs and and like I get it, that's awesome, like it's effort to try and get yourself to do stuff. Some may have even found creative ways when you can't get yourself to do stuff to like still feel like you're working, but like you're not really doing important work, like AKA research rabbit holes, right? Like, oh, you got to find the best podcast mic, right? So you're going to research it for like 3 hours, right? We might make things overly complex. I know certainly some of my launches before I was aware of this pattern, I would make everything super complex and then I could never get it all done. Right. And so then things would be kind of not quite great and some mistakes and that just were like kind of turn off type of mistakes versus like little ones that can be ignored. Right. Another thing that some of us do is we work so hard at getting ourselves to function. We have these rigid systems and self-care routines. And don't get me wrong, I have a self-care routine and I think that's important. But I think we can also get to the point of obsession around it because it's like, oh my gosh, if I don't do this, I won't function. I'll fall apart. And to some degree, that may be true. Like I know I've got to get exercise in somewhat regularly or my focus is out the window. So it's, I'm not saying like we shouldn't do things to take care of ourselves, but some of it is our mindset around this, right? And we come by this honestly. Growing up, and you've heard me talk about this before, but growing up, most of us, whether we were diagnosed or not, most of us were given so many messages, like probably at least a dozen messages a day, if not more than a dozen messages a day that were about like what we were doing isn't good enough or not correct, people criticizing us. And that's just like our parents and teachers. And no, like no meanness against them or anything, like no bad feelings there. Like they were doing the best they could with what they knew at the time, especially if you're a Gen Xer like me, even a millennial, like people didn't talk about ADHD. And even nowadays, we're just starting to talk about what ADHD looks like in girls and women. And so a lot of those people in our youth, they were well intentioned. It's just that they still harmed us by sending us the message, of the critical comments that we weren't good enough or that we just need to pull our shit together or whatever it is, right? And yet that doesn't mean we weren't hurt, right? Because we were. So back to where this leaves us is we learned that the best way to function with ADHD is to just force ourselves to do stuff, to will ourselves to do stuff, to try all these tools and strategies. But the problem is is when we do that, we get strategy fatigue. We get burned out. We can't find things that work. Or maybe we find things that work, or maybe they don't work very long. But if we find things that work, maybe we spend almost all of our time functioning and completing tasks, both for work and for our business and for our home life. But then like we have little time or energy even to do things that we enjoy, like having fun, relaxing, just reading a book or going out on the lake or seeing a friend, right? Because we're so drained from trying so hard to function, right? And so the thing is here's the misconception that we were taught. We were taught that we just have to find the right tool that will work for us. And the thing is most of those tools were created by neurotypical people. And that doesn't mean they're bad tools. It just means that the person who created them probably doesn't have ADHD. And so a lot of those tools aren't going to be effective for our ADHD brain. Right? And that's not because they're messed up or we're messed up. It's just like, oh, we're just trying something that wasn't designed for us, which is kind of like the whole world, right? Like right now, most of the world is designed for neurotypical people. And we can have our feelings about that. And I think it's certainly important to work through those feelings as they come up. But at the same time, the reality is as it stands now, the world is just not designed for us. So it's like, what do we do? Many of us have been trying all these strategies and rigid structure and systems and tools just to function. And you know what? If you've got a job still while you're building your business, you may have to do some of that. On the other hand, maybe there might be a way that you can set your life up, even if you have a job still while you're building your business. There might be a way that you can set your life up that works better. So the question is then is what do we do instead? Like what do we do instead of trying all these strategies and whatever? Well, I don't want you to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are some strategies that are going to work well for you. And the truth of the matter is, we do need to find ways to get ourselves to do things. I think a big piece of using strategies, though, is recognizing we're probably going to have to change them from time to time. They're going to be different for different kinds of tasks. There are some that are going to work better than others, and some that are certainly more designed for how our brains work. And I think as we women are coming out with our ADHD, perhaps there will be tools that are better designed for us. And the biggest overarching thing that we can do to function optimally and still enjoy our lives is to set up our life in a way that it honors our ADHD. So instead of forcing yourself to, do a launch exactly the same way as everyone does it who doesn't have ADHD, or instead of forcing yourself to set your business up or your work hours to look like people who don't have ADHD, right? It's knowing what you need. And the deal is what you need is unique to you. And so it's like, how do you figure that out? How do you figure what you need? Well, you can look at so far what doesn't work. I know when I've had jobs and I had to start work at 8 or 7:30 even, that did not work. It just did not work for me. So as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, I start work at 10. That's what I do, because then I can sleep till 7:30, get up, still do my gratitude journal, my morning writing, my meditation, and then exercise and do a little bit of yoga and get ready and feel like I'm starting the day fresh and ready to go, instead of sometimes I'm still rushing. Sometimes I still come in hot to work. It's like, okay, here I come. But if we can, create whatever schedule we need. You might be someone who's like, no, I like to just roll out of bed and start working. Great, then do that. Or maybe you're someone who needs a split schedule. Like maybe you do really great work in the morning and then maybe you do really great work after dinner, right? And whether or not you have kids and if they're in school or not might I don't want to say dictate that, but it might influence what your schedule looks like. But when we had Sally Crew on the show a few weeks ago now, we talked about like noticing your energy level. And really, this is figuring out like how to set up your day to work for you. Also, set up your business to work for you. If you find that launching is like the most stressful thing, I find it incredibly stressful, right? To launch, especially while I'm serving people, then find a way to do 1 or 2 huge launches a year and then focus on serving your clients in between. Now, if you have a business where you don't launch, then that's going to look different, right? And for those of you who don't know what a launch is, if you're selling a digital product, as you're getting closer to, when you're going to put it out there, you can't just put it on your website and expect people to come to you. The internet doesn't work that way anymore. There's so many people out there offering things that we actually have to do things that invite people into our space. They get to know us and learn, like, does this lady know what she's talking about? Can she help me? Does she understand the problem? Does she have a good solution and one that I haven't tried and that doesn't sound like everything else, right? And so a launch is getting your information out there so people know how you can help them. So that way, then you can help them, right? So anyway, but you might be someone who like, oh my gosh, the details of a launch are insane. I can never do that. Or you might be someone who hires a VA or some kind of assistant, maybe not a virtual assistant, but maybe an in-person assistant to manage all those details or manage you, right? Brene Brown always jokes like her sister is like the chief executive officer of Brene or something like that, or COO, Chief Operations Officer of Brene. I don't remember, but like her sister kind of manages her, right? I'm not saying Brene has ADHD. I don't know what is that's about for her. Maybe just she's got a lot on her plate, right? But the fact of the matter is however you need to do this is how you need to do it. There's no wrong answer here. You get to create this life. You get to create this business to work for your brain. And I got to tell you, a first step of that is getting comfortable with accepting, you know what? This is just how my brain works. This is how my brain is. My ADHD brain is. And when I align with that, I crush it. Sometimes, most of the time. Right. And then honoring that sometimes we can do all the things that we know work and it's just not going to be there. Our energy might tank, or we might, still think we've got something and maybe we're like, ooh, I shouldn't have handled that detail, right? Like in my last launch, I set up a workflow for my emails to go out for my secret podcast. And the email for day 1 went out and the email for day 5 went out, but I had added some emails in the sequence in between and I messed it up. And what I should have done is just asked for help from the person who manages that, which is actually Sally Crew. I had her on the show, right? And she could help me with that. But in my head, I was like, no, I can do this. I used to work in tech, right? Instead of asking for help. And so some of getting ourselves to be able to function with ADHD is knowing ourselves more fully, right? If we can know ourselves and know our strengths and abilities and the things we really can handle well. And then if we can also know where like we tend to drop the ball in these kind of places, or like these are areas where we're going to miss details because our brain just doesn't catch details in that area. And that's when we need to ask for help, right? So, like I said, some of this is shifting your mindset to, okay, yeah, I have ADHD. That's just how my brain is. I just need to find ways that work with that instead of all these neurotypical things. And then, secondly, like I said, getting to know yourself and figuring out how does your ADHD brain work so that then after those 2 steps, you can get yourself to a place of now, what do I need to put in my life? And sometimes figuring out how our brain works can, it can feel overwhelming, but you just have to notice. In fact, one of the best ways to notice when you make a mistake or when something doesn't go as intended, right? That's a great way to find out, like, oh, okay, my brain doesn't work so well with these workflow things. I mean, I kind of knew that, but I wasn't admitting it to myself till I had a huge mistake, right? And I was like, oh, okay. So sometimes mistakes or times when we're like, oh, shoot. If you catch yourself saying that, like maybe get a notebook. I mean, us ADHDers love our journals and notebooks. Most of us do. So, grab a notebook and just start to jot down that stuff. And then you'll eventually notice patterns like, oh, yeah, this I can do tech stuff, but for me, it's like this specific tech stuff is hard for me. Or maybe you're like, all tech stuff is, or maybe it's task organization and you need someone to help you with that, like a coach or sometimes an assistant, like I said, right? So another way that you can set up your ADHD life, your ADHD work, is to set up your workspace in a way that works for you, right? For me, that means I work in different places. If I work in the same place all the time, I get bored. So right now I'm in the spot where I do my podcast. On Thursdays, I tend to do work here, but every once in a while it gets kind of boring. I feel stuck. So I head off to Caribou Coffee and I get some work done there. Then on Saturdays, I go to a different Caribou Coffee and do work there because on Saturdays, my cat Eva cannot help but bother me. Like she's just like, hey, it's the weekend. You should not be doing any work. So if I have some work I need to get done on a Saturday, then I'll buzz up to a different Caribou Coffee. So it's a different environment. And that amount of noise for me, right? When we're talking about our work environment, that amount of noise for me is enough distraction, or not distraction, but like just enough noise so it doesn't feel too quiet, because that can be hard to focus in for me, but it's not so loud that it's distracting, right? And then during the week, I see therapy clients. I'm at my office for most of them, but on Tuesdays, I have a half day here. But when I work on Tuesdays, I actually, for this business, I do my work upstairs on Tuesdays, which is where I see my private practice client. And just that change of scenery can really help me focus, but also look at things a different way. And so for you, if that might be a thing, like environmentally, you may need to shake up your workspace. Or you might be someone who needs it to be exactly the same. So that grounds you and you're like, you have the environmental cue of, I'm at my desk. This is work time. you know? And it doesn't really matter what it is, right? There's no like competition. There's no awards for who does it the best or who does it the right way. It's more just like figuring out what works for you. A big piece of this, in order to be able to do that, like I said, is accepting that this is how your ADHD brain works. And so you may have some layers of shame to work through, or some layers of like parts of you who feel not good enough because of those early messages we talked about. And there's a way to work with that. I work with that with my one-to-one clients. I work with it in my program, but essentially you just start to work with the parts of you that feel that way. And you get really curious, like, start to build a relationship with that inner feeling or inner part. If you don't like the word part, you can use feeling. Like, yeah, what's that about that I feel not good enough? Oh yeah, I remember, Mr. Coyne saying this to me when I was this age. Oh yeah, that didn't help me. Like that wasn't useful. And so I have a part of me that's stuck back there. I have a part of me that thinks that I'm still not good enough because of that message. And, certainly there's deeper work that can be done there, especially if it's something from your youth. But also sometimes we can, sit with it, right to the part, write our feelings out and feel the feelings, feel the sadness, feel the anger that like, you know what, that wasn't okay. That was not okay. And sometimes we need to do some trauma work. And so there's, certainly you can find an IFS therapist. That's what that is, talking about the parts, who can help with those earlier parts. You can join my TCTSY class. It's a trauma center, trauma sensitive yoga, which is specifically for trauma, evidence-based. That's another way to heal that trauma. So at any rate, we may need to work with these parts of us who hold that shame or that feeling of not being good enough. If you're noticing they're getting in the way when you're trying to just accept, like, okay, this is how my brain works, I'm just going to do it this way, right? And that applies to your life too. Like for me, I know I like putting away laundry. I don't want to say it's like the bane of my existence, but kind of like for some reason, putting away my clean laundry just like sucks the life out of me. I don't know why. It just does. I guess it doesn't really matter why. And so I've got a system where I don't have to do it every week if I don't want to, but I have to do it at least every other week. Otherwise, like I just get this huge mound of clean clothes in my laundry bin and then I can't find socks. Right. And you might be like, we can buy more socks. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but then like that pile just gets bigger. So that's not helping me. Right. But you might be like, no, buying more socks works for me. Great. Do it. Like, that's great. But knowing that this is how my brain works, that I'm not always going to put away my clean laundry, I made a little spot on top of like my dirty laundry bins, like it pulls out. So it's like a little shelf on top of it. Kind of, it's, I don't know if the right word is shelf, cabinet, I guess. But anyway, and I just have my laundry basket there. And sometimes it's empty and sometimes there's clean laundry in it. And the world doesn't end either way. So this can be true for our business too. So you might be like, you know, everyone else says that a live launch right now is the way to go, but a live launch terrifies me and overwhelms me. So you find a different way to do it. Or, you might be like, other people might be like, oh, yeah, if you're a therapist, for example, and your business is a private practice, other people might be like, oh, I just had someone else or I just did my own credentialing because it's not that hard. You just do it. It's a pain in the ass, but you get it done. And you might be like, oh my gosh, there's too many moving pieces there. I need someone else to do that for me, or I need someone else to do my billing for me, right? So a lot of how we address this problem of how do we get ourselves to do stuff is shifting our mindset towards one of like acceptance of our ADHD brain and how we do things. And then we can work with it. Yeah. So I would encourage you, if you're listening to this, you're like, what do I do now, Jen? I would encourage you to pay attention. Like, notice what's easy for you, notice what's hard. If you're one of the ones who's like, I can get everything done, I just don't have any fun. Okay, well, maybe see, like, do you have to get all those tasks done? Are there things that actually don't have to be done that can be deleted? Or are there things that you could delegate so you do have some free time? Or are there things that can be shaved off of your like your self-care routine that like are nice but not necessary? Like if you're already doing like 3 hours of self-care, which is I was doing about 2.5 3 hours of self-care, and it was just getting to be crazy. And I was using this journal program called Silk and Sonder, and I loved it. It was super fun, but it was just like I was like, okay, I'm spending 3 hours every morning doing self-care just so I can function. This is not working for me. And as much as I like that program, I was like, you know what? That's 20 minutes out of my morning. And I already write. I already do something for that part of my brain. And I can do some deeper journaling if I need to on the weekends. Right. So I eliminated that and it gave me 20 extra minutes to sleep. Because now I'm learning during perimenopause, apparently I need 8.5 hours of sleep instead of 8 hours of sleep. So it's like, all right, whatever. I don't know if this will be a permanent shift. I'm sure you'll be posted because I share a lot, but I think you get the point, right? It's about like looking at things. If you're doing too much so you can function, it's like, what of that, like, how can you streamline some of that, or what can be deleted? Or maybe some of your tasks need to be deleted or delegated. Yeah. And maybe even this is the big one. I should probably do a whole separate episode on this. Maybe even letting go of perfectionism. I was in a program that the constant saying was 70% perfect is perfect, 100% perfect is failure. And Brandon Lucero said that. And I found that that is true, because if you go for 100% perfect, especially with ADHD, what do we know about that? Are you going to get it done? Probably not. Right? Because first of all, we're human and we make mistakes, but also some of our ADHD brains are just not good at details. And so if you're one of those people that has all this scaffolding in place to, get yourself to function optimally, you may have to like let go of some of your perfectionism. That might be what helps you function best with your ADHD. And so whether you're on one end of the spectrum where you're like, you're working so hard to function that you're not having fun, you may need to work on perfectionism and letting go of like the pride. Like, even though I have ADHD, I'm really good at getting stuff done. Right? Like I've had some pride there, and now I'm like, ooh, sometimes I miss details, or sometimes I send out an email and I miss the link, or like, it happened in August. I sent out a oopsie email. Right? And I will tell you that when I was able to let go of some of that, it created freedom for me to actually do the things I needed to do for my business instead of like putzing over all the little details. But if you're at the other end of the spectrum and you have like ADHD paralysis, you can't even get yourself to do stuff. You may also struggle with perfectionism, but you're avoiding doing anything so that you don't get in trouble or told you're stupid or not good enough or whatever the language was, right? So I could probably do a whole separate talk on perfectionism, but what I will say now, in the interest of time, is that this is a part of you. If you're noticing a perfectionistic tendency as you work with this is a part of you likely trying to protect you from other people hurting you with their words about not being good enough or not getting your shit together or not getting it done or missing details or whatever the narrative is, right? So again, if you can work with these parts of yourself and say, "Oh, hey, I see you. Oh, what's your concern?" Right? You see, so you've been being a perfectionist to help me, but what's the concern if you weren't doing that anymore? That can be interesting if you let yourself write about that. You'll find all kinds of things come up, and then you can start to deal with the underlying issues. So then instead of layering all these tools and strategies on programs like scaffolding and bandages, instead, now you're dealing with the underlying issue so that you can actually function from within instead of just like trying to keep your shit together all the time. I guarantee it will be a lot less exhausting. So, all right. That's what I got today. I'd love it if you would uh, share or follow. If my gosh, follow if you're not following yet, but please share. Also, if you comment on this episode, I'm going to send you a free guide. The five, no, I forgot the name of it. Of course, right? Total typical ADHD under pressure, can't remember, but it's like the 5-step master task plan is what it's called. And so it helps you kind of break down how you can get yourself to do stuff by honoring your energy and doing some of this other work. So make sure you follow, share, and then if you leave a comment, share your contact info, then we'll get you a guide. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.